Hey, everybody. Welcome to Take the Black Live, the one and only show several years running on the internet that dares to discuss the topics the other people won't talk about, like TV, movies, fantasy, sci-fi, dragons, space lasers, etc. I am Dan Selke of winterscoming.net, here with Daniel Roman of winterscoming.net. Hey to everyone.
Hello.
Great to see Martha, Andrew, Julie. Good to see you guys here. And Daniel, off the bat, I have two questions for you.
Yes.
First, how do you feel about reaching 10,000 subscribers? So exciting. Thanks, Andrew, for pointing that out. And second, you're wearing a pleather jacket, a dragon t-shirt, and a pentagram around your neck.
That's right.
How was the Ozzy Osbourne tribute show you just came from?
Ozzy Osbourne tribute shows are always a good time. Obviously, in the library, they hold a lot of them,
Mhm.
because if there's one thing Ozzy loves, it's literacy. Uh, but yeah, no, I am very excited. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed, commented, liked, followed us over the years. It's been a pleasure sharing this journey with you all and can't wait to, for the next. So yeah, things are good. How are you, Dan? And how are all of you out there?
Yeah. Hello, Christian. Good to see all of you here. And thanks, Fantasy Fan, on 10K subscribers. It is pretty cool. It'd be so fun if this channel what if we actually reach like a ton of people, like hundreds of thousands? Would you be shocked and awed, or would you be like, it sounds about right?
I would think this has been the inevitable rise, like Daenerys Targaryen eventually going back to Westeros. It was meant to happen.
Nice.
But no, it would also be really cool. And
It'd be
obviously,
very fun.
the
And
more
then
we
we burn
talk
it all down.
about stuff, the more fun it is to talk to more people. So,
Thank you, Julie. Glad you're doing well. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, it's been fun. And you know what? Hopefully, only onwards and upwards from here. And the
yes.
reason folks subscribe to us is because of our piercing insights into all things fantasy movies, sci-fi, TV, etc. And boy, do we have some interesting things to talk about this week, mostly
We
related
do.
to The Wheel of Time, the fantasy show du jour, Amazon Prime Video's adaptation of Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson's 14-book-long epic fantasy series. Season 2 is wrapped up, season 3 is on the way, and the opinions are flying fiercely and furiously. First,
Yes.
I thought we would go over what we know about the third season of the show, because season 2 is over, and we're already getting some juicy hints about the third season. Season 2 is over. And then we will get
Yes.
into some, just to tease you all, some
Well,
meaty controversy going around the interwebs over the past couple of days.
yeah. A cat just leaped behind you. I feel like everyone should know that. Audio listeners, a cat just leaped across the screen behind Dan.
Very cool.
So
That's Missy. She might make some cameo appearances during the show. We'll see. We'll count them.
one can hope.
If you're drinking, take a drink whenever she appears. All right. So the Wheel of Time season 3. So you know the stuff better than I do. I know that the next season will adapt the book The Shadow Rising, which is the fourth book in the series. Very, very popular. I'm reading it now. Um, there's like an agreement among Brandon Sanderson, who wrote the final 3 books, on Rafe Judkins, who does the showrunner. It's one of the best books in the series. That's very
Yes.
exciting. It will take us to places like the Aiel Waste, Roydian, which is how they say it in the audiobooks,
Oh,
and
no
the
way.
tropical city of Tanchico. Daniel,
Okay.
why are those places interesting?
All right. So some of the audiobook pronunciations, I have to wonder if this is before the time of really giving pronunciation guides, because I've never heard someone call it Roydian. Ruidian is always the name I've heard it pronounced, and I know that's the way
Mogadine,
Rafe Judkins
Roydian.
pronounced it.
Yeah,
Yep,
I
the
heard.
the Roydian wastes. To break some of this stuff down, we got these confirmations of all these things at New York City Comic Con this past weekend, which showrunner Rafe Judkins was able to be at because the writer's strike is over. So it was his first in-person appearance doing an event for the Wheel of Time since the strikes ended. And yeah, basically, so we're going to keep this relatively spoiler free for the Shadow Rising, but
Oh, yeah, I think so.
so the Aiel Waste is where characters like Avienda are from, the Aiel Spear Maidens we met in season 2. We're going to explore the Aiel homelands. People who aren't from there call it the Waste. People from there call it the Threefold Land. And that's kind of like a very cool little microcosm example of how we're going to dig into the culture of the Aiel. They have a very unique culture in Robert Jordan's books. So it's going to get explored a lot. And one of the centerpieces of the Aiel culture, Aiel storyline of the Shadow Rising is Ruidian, which is basically an abandoned city in the middle of this desert wasteland, which has a lot of magical artifacts in it, a lot of significance to the history. There's a very iconic part of the Shadow Rising that revolves around Ruidian. So yeah, we're gonna see that next season. And then, oh yeah, take a drink. Missy's on screen. Missy's butt is prominently on display. And the the last location that we'll mention, so Tanchico, which this one is really exciting because we weren't sure if we were going to get it. So Tanchico is a city that several characters go to in their search for members of the Black Aja, which are Aes Sedai sworn to the Dark One. And that seemed like a storyline they could transplant to another city if they needed to, like for budget reasons. So it was really exciting to get the confirmation we're gonna see Tanchico. And Tanchico, Judkins said, is very tropical and very unlike anything we've ever seen. He talked about how they built a bar set for a specific scene in Tanchico with a bunch of like plants hanging from the ceiling, and he kind of made it sound like a pirate den almost. And how it was so fun that like after shooting, everyone just stayed and hung out at this bar that they built. So yeah, those are some locations, some things we got confirmed. And another one that's, I'm curious how you feel about this, Dan. So they've cast another Forsaken for season 3, aside from Moghedien, who we haven't met yet. Any thoughts about that? I don't want to just ramble here.
But you can feel free to ramble. Oh no, because I haven't met all the Forsaken in the books. Obviously they like the Forsaken. They like these villains. They like the campiness. They like the archness. Honestly, I am a little afraid that the Wheel of Time is in danger of becoming a show, one of those shows where the villains are the best part about it, because they're so much fun. Like Lanfear and Shamiel were a blast. The ending is all about the Forsaken. It's just, they're juicy and fun to sink your teeth into. So I hope they're able to balance the wicked evil of the villains with compelling stories for the main characters. And I hope they do. Because a big part of the problems with this last season was, I guess, and we'll talk about this a little more, was kind of the balance between how much time do you give certain storylines, and does giving time to one storyline crowd out another one? Like, for example, they also said in season 3 it'll be more focused on Rand and Perrin, aka tall, cheekbones, bald guy who's the dragon, and Wolf Boy, who honestly, like they were a little you could tell that they kind of focused on maybe Nynaeve and Egwene, and Perrin and Mat felt like a bit like an afterthought. So they only have so many episodes. They got to focus on whatever they can do, but it'll be cool to see them dig into that a little more, and to see them spread the love around, the wealth around. By the way, great comments as always. Jay DePaul makes a great point. Is there a map of the Wheel of Time world, like an official map?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, there is.
There are tons of maps that you can find,
like in the books or anything.
Yeah, well, the books have one at the beginning. You know, it's one of those fantasy series where there's a map at the front. There's also several like world books. Like I have one that's like the world of Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time that came out after book 7 or 8, I think. And that one's got a bunch of maps of, you know, the main continents, which I don't think really has a name. People kind of call it Randland because it just, he never named it. There are maps of the Shan-Chan continent too out there. So, but I like this comment because I do think the show maybe needs to make the geography a little clearer. And I think next season, I have no idea. Yeah, well, it hasn't been super important thus far, honestly. You know, Falm is on a peninsula. That's really the big thing we needed to know going into this. But I think next season the geopolitics become more important because the Aiel are not secluded just for the hell of it. Their homeland is on the other
Mhm.
side of this huge mountain range, and it's kind of just understood people don't typically cross it. So that's why the Aiel are out there, and it's such a crazy thing to see people like Avienda out in these other places that we saw in season
Sure.
2.
I mean, I feel like that's where it starts to matter a bit, because like you're right.
Yes.
Like, we travel from point A to point B, and it might be enough to know that we're in a different place. But once you've been to like the Two Rivers and Falm and the White Tower and Kyrian and like all these, and there's like another continent coming in, it starts to you start to want to know vaguely where things are in relation to other things, like exactly how far are they traveling. Like, and distance is becoming a factor, because it's like, well, we have to take the ways to get through here, so it must have been a far way, but like how far? Or apparently others can just kind of wander there, like Perrin and the Aiel. Like the more it spreads out, the more it starts to feel like an unaddressed issue that we don't really know where things are. Speaking of some of our, but I'm sure they will, and we should like spotlight a map sometime. Speaking of all the places we've been, there is a picture on the season 3 set of the Two Rivers, which you will remember from the series premiere. I kind of wish you would have spent a little more time here, honestly, in the season 1. It's like where this is the Shire. This is where the characters are from.
Yeah.
And we'll be going back there. Shh, don't tell anybody. But we will for a big story next season featuring Perrin and his buddies. And it looks great.
It does look great. I love seeing this shot of the Two Rivers. It's almost kind of nice to hear you say you wish we spent more time there, because we spent like kind of a comparable amount of time there to the books. Like, we really don't hang out there at the beginning, but we're going to go back to the Two Rivers this season 3. And it is going to become a major part of the story again. And I did want to highlight, so you talked about Rand and Perrin getting more of a focus this season, and so they talked a little more specifically about that, and basically that they like to allot like 2 episodes a season is what they're trying to do, to really dig deep on like a big character moment. So Judkins specifically used that as an example for Egwene and Nynaeve, because we had the Seanchan Damane episode for Egwene, we had the Accepted Trial for Nynaeve, and those are kind of expanding very iconic parts of the story that revolve around them. So next season, Perrin and Rand are getting that treatment, and they need it. Like you said, Perrin is going back to the Two Rivers. That's a huge plot line for Perrin. Rand, we don't need to talk too much about where Rand's going. You can probably guess if you don't know, maybe. Or can you? But he's going to have a big moment too. So yeah, a lot to look forward to. And one other thing I just want to make sure we don't miss, it was also confirmed we're going to meet the Sea Folk next season. Cats on screen, take a drink if you're listening.
Sea Folk.
Yeah. So the Atha'an Mieri is, which I'm sure I'm saying wrong, are the Sea Folk. They are renowned traders. They got mentioned once at the beginning of season 2. Judkins confirmed they built a Sea Folk ship and have filmed scenes with Sea Folk. So yeah, I would assume we'll see them in Tanchico, but yeah, a lot of very exciting stuff coming up in the middle of time, season 3.
Some good stuff in the comments. Andrew's drinking his tea. Yeah, that tea's gonna be gone. This cat likes attention. But yeah, some comments in among the commenters that, I mean, look, in terms of geography, yeah, Game of Thrones, it just did it so well. It's one of those things where, like, should every show with a giant map just open like that? That can't be the case. Like, you have to be able to innovate. But it was so helpful.
It's always kind of funny.
There are other ways to do it.
Yeah, it's kind of funny to me to hear these sorts of debates, like, should every fantasy show open with a map? Just because, like, publishing kind of needed to figure that out too. Like, fantasy books didn't always have maps in the beginning, and it's like kind of very common now for this exact reason we're talking about. Without a map, sometimes it's hard to know where things are.
Absolutely no.
So I hear what Rant Al Moore is saying about Game of Thrones needs to stop being the show.
Good name, by the way.
to reach for it. Yes, great name, Rance. Um, and you know, it's hard because they did do the map, and the map was really helpful. And I do think Wheel of Time. I hope it doesn't do the exact same thing, but give us something for a map. So even if you're just going to put it on screen a couple of times, like The Witcher tried to do this just a little in season 3. They have one scene where there's a painted map room, like Cersei has at the very end of the
Oh, that's
season.
fun.
So you can at least, if you're that confused, you can go back and pause on that scene and kind of look at where things are a little bit. Like even something like that would be better than nothing. But we'll see when season 3 premieres.
But yeah, speaking of things that the Wheel of Time might have slightly overlooked or I don't know, done maybe a less than stellar job of explaining. Over the weekend, I think it might have been Friday, Brandon Sanderson, who wrote the final 3 Wheel of Time books after Robert Jordan, who wrote the first 11, passed. He finished the series, basically. He was entrusted with it by Robert Jordan's wife, and all agree he did a good job. So basically, he is a co-author of the Wheel of Time books. He advises on the show. He's a writer in his own right. He writes the Stormlight Archives. He's a very prolific fantasy author.
He's excellent.
And he's involved in the production of the show. He appeared on a stream where he reacted to the season finale of season 2 along with a couple other YouTubers, including Daniel Green, and then the gentleman who runs a major Wheel of Time YouTube channel, whose name is
Matt Hatch from the Dusty Wheel.
Matt Hatch. And it was notable because when I tell you, dear viewers and listeners, that Brandon Sanderson, the man who wrote the Wheel of Time, watched this episode of the Wheel of Time TV show in front of God, fans, and everyone, and just kind of just tore it, not tear it down, rip it limb from limb, but he had a lot of criticisms in a way that was honestly sort of bracing and unexpected, because you just sort of expect folk this deeply involved in a show and this tied to a project, a franchise, to world, to be a little more careful, like kind of towing the corporate line. And if they have criticisms, just keep it to yourself, maybe, just because you don't want to like hurt the brand. Not Mr. Sanderson. Mr. Sanderson went fairly ham in talking about what he didn't like. He said he kept saying that he really likes it overall, that the show's doing a great job, that it's better than the Rings of Power season 1, that the casting's amazing, but that did come off as like kind of compliment sandwiches. Like he would drop a compliment and then go for like 4 to 5 things he didn't like, and then another compliment there. So the overall impression was that he had some issues. And personally, I thought it was fairly hysterical. How about you?
Well, I've been curious to get your take on this, because I'm in so deep on this stuff with the Wheel of Time at this point that I have to recognize my own bias. So I will say I was one of the people who was very shocked watching this, because I watched this live when it happened, and there were quite a lot of people who watched live who had been looking forward to this. It was kind of marketed as like first watch reactions with Brandon Sanderson and these 2 very popular Wheel of Time content creators. And really what it was Brandon Sanderson offers critical author commentary while 2 other people try to pay attention. So like they had their half-formed thoughts while he had things he'd very clearly been thinking about like for years that bugged him. And that's fair.
Because he'd read the scripts, but he hadn't actually watched the episode before.
Yes, which I think is one of the things that's almost like a little bit of folly about this whole situation. So like on the one hand, like Brandon Sanderson read the scripts for season 2. He didn't watch any of the season. The finale was the first episode he watched. And it's kind of like you can get impressions of things from the scripts, but like I think anyone who's looked at a script knows like that's very different than seeing like a finished show. And there were times where he kind of commented on things and he almost like contradicted himself a little bit, where it's like, man, like I would have loved to have your opinion after you watch this. I guess I was just like a little surprised at how like carelessly he commented on some things when he hadn't was almost coming at it from like an uninformed standpoint with some of these. Like he made a comment about the Matt's weapon for example, that he makes, saying it is his iconic weapon he will wield in the books, which Matt has like a bladed spear he gets. And then later he admitted he hasn't read scripts for season 3, so he doesn't actually know if that's the case. So there were some things like that where I was like, man, you just threw a bunch of fans into confusion just because you were kind of firing off. So yeah, I don't know. Am I being too sensitive about this, Dan? I was surprised at kind of how almost disrespectful this was. The way he handled himself, not the stream itself.
And by the way, don't worry, Nicole. We will get to some of the things he said, because some of them were interesting.
Yeah,
it was okay. I mean, I liked it. I thought it was entertaining. I was interested. I always like when someone sort of, I don't know, not to sound too tech bro, but disruption is kind of fun when it's on this smaller scale. Who doesn't like kind of a swerve right when you're supposed to swerve left and entertain me? I want to be entertained. You could call it. I think that Rant Al Moore said it was low tact or low self-awareness.
Yeah, or, agree. Hard agree.
A little irresponsible. I'm not sure though, because I mean, like the man did literally write the Wheel of Time books. The man is, working on the Wheel of Time show. Although I guess that would make it irresponsible. But then maybe he shouldn't have watched anything at all. And well, I agree with you that it did sort of play like he clearly had been thinking about this stuff for a while and kind of got to air it. I didn't like the format. I didn't like the way they were like looking above the camera and you couldn't see what they were watching. And there were like these moments of like silence where y'all just watched a TV show. That's a little odd. But let's look at some of the things he said, because I think at least somebody said, if Fantasy Fan says his points made sense, though. I think some of it made sense, and I think some of them
did,
and some of them did. He seemed a little preoccupied on certain things.
I agree.
But let's just go watch. Sort of like me, Dan. I love a bit of turbulence. Really, Julie enjoys some turbulence on a plane. Interesting.
Oh, there you go. Well, you're in the right place, fun. Julie.
Just like, don't be drinking your ginger ale while it goes, or you're gonna be in a world of pain. It wakes up the babies, the turbulence. I don't know. No, I can do without turbulence. Maybe it's on a long flight to wake me up. Okay. Some of his and Rant Al Moore says some of his generalities make sense. I think mostly what I'm looking at is the generalities, and then we can use some specifics to prove our points. So okay.
Yeah, totally.
I also loved how he was honest about how he like pushed back against some of the choices they made while making the season, like while they were writing it. He was like, don't do this, please. And then they did it. For example, he said he fought, and by the way, I don't have a Brandon Sanderson voice like I have a George R. R. Martin voice. I don't have one yet. I'm not sure I ever will. He said, I fought pretty hard against the whole thing with Moiraine doesn't have her powers. I just don't think it worked. And maybe again, it's me looking forward. But if we're having people lose their powers and get them back just for convenience of like a few episodes, it really distracts from the idea of losing powers, getting powers back. I don't think we needed it. I tried on that one. He said that a lot. So like, I tried, guys. I tried to not have them do that. And he thought that like the Lana Moiraine scenes in the beginning were pretty weak. This one I complete. Oh, and it was kind of fun hearing him say things that I'd been opining over the past couple of weeks. Of course. Like, you didn't include in your write-up, but he fully agreed with me when he said, like, and then a bunch of randos come out and fight Lan for no reason. And I was like, ha, innocent.
Yeah, it was too small a thing for me to fit in.
Oh, no, you just for shame. No, I'm not kidding. But I agree the Lana Moiraine thing was weak. He also was with me, and he would have an inside view on this, that they did it to kind of give Rosamund Pike something to do. Because her character doesn't really have much to do in the Great Hunt.
Yeah, which Rafe Judkins
on this.
Yeah, they've said that pretty explicitly. I was looking back at an interview from the end of season 1, and Rafe Judkins said exactly that. He literally said, we can't just bench Rosamund Pike for a season. So that's why
they could, though.
Uh,
Which,
I
by the way,
think
you
this.
wouldn't have to.
Well, so here's the thing. Sanderson said you could have given her more material in a bunch of different ways. And I
Yeah,
do
they did.
agree with him. This is one of those things where I wish he had watched it so that he could really dig into the adaptation angle of this. Because I really hated Moiraine and Lan, like their plot line for like 6 episodes. I hated it.
That's a lot of
Um,
episodes.
it is a lot of episodes, but I think the way they pulled it together in episode 7 made me retroactively like it all more. And not to say it would have changed Sanderson's opinion, but he couldn't weigh in with that sort of like depth, I guess, because he's only read the scripts. He didn't see how it was actually executed. But this is fair. I do think this is a fair criticism, and I do think looking back, the early Lan and Moiraine scenes are part of some of the weakest parts of the season. So yeah, this one shouldn't really come as a surprise to anyone, honestly. I think we've all talked about this, and he was kind of voicing something we've all been saying for months. So that's probably like the least controversial thing he said, really.
I mean, putting aside like the whole idea of whether it's tactful to say it at all, I agree with the substance of it. And I don't know. It was so much fun. I'm inclined to think tact be damned. Just go ahead and speak a piece. It's me. He kept saying he liked it. He just then he had problems with it.
Yeah.
As Nicole says, I agree with the weak Lana Moraine scenes. As a non-book reader, I still don't understand their bond and how it works. He just seems obsessed with her.
Yeah, they muddied it up a lot. They really did. So I agree with that for sure.
Another fun, cute little thing was like, he again, like, this is the guy who literally wrote 3 of the books, so he can speak in kind of big things. I think that Padan Fain is a villain who, honestly, you might like see a picture of him and not know who he is. I wouldn't blame you. That really haven't done much of them on the show. He's been a pretty not much screen time, and Sanderson was just like, he's like the guy. He's played by a black actor. He's a villain. He has
Johann
the horn of
Myers.
Valyr. He swaggers all over the place. He tempted Matt to the dark side with a little blade thing. And Restaurant was like, let's be honest, book Fain is one of Robert Jordan's weaker characters, going after the original author. He didn't know what to do with them. When he was writing. True.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it is kind of funny to look at these 3 different almost versions of Wheel of Time, because Brandon Sanderson's 3 Wheel of Time books, like, they're continuing the story, but there are some elements that are just a little different. So like you can almost kind of look at them as like 3 different iterations of the Wheel of Time a little bit. And I think all 3 of them have not really known what to do with Padan Fain. Like Robert Jordan he introduced Fain as kind of a cool character. He in the books, he gets infected by the darkness at Shadar Logoth. So he's like a dark villain who dark friends also fear. He's not quite as just a regular dark friend like he is in the show. But it seems like, the show didn't really have time for that. Sanderson got critiques from people when he released his books, like he kind of dropped Padan Fain at the end, which he kind of did. And Robert Jordan introduced Padan Fain and then just like didn't really do very much with him for books at a time. So yeah, that one's fair.
Fair enough. Yeah. Some great comments, by the way. I don't want to get, because we don't get to the comments, but just, I love it when folk say things that agree with me. I know I love that. So just briefly, just talks about really quick with the Lana Moraine stuff. Like Randall says that Moiraine could have been dealing with her sister while still having her powers, while Lan was working with Rand on his sword skills. Lan was working the angles. The Moiraine stuff, my problem with it was that like she a lot of what she did, she could have done just fine with her powers. But unless you want to respond, can we move on from that bit?
Yeah. No, I think that taking powers away and giving them back, I do think that could cause problems for them down the road. So I don't need to comment more.
If you do, jump in. I don't want to step on your brain. He had some kind of big generalities to say, Sanderson. For example, I think he was talking about the Horn of Valyr scene, which was one of my favorite scenes from the finale.
Same.
And said that a lot of the problems with this episode are actually previous episodes, and that the scenes are all good. A lot of them are good, but what you're having happen doesn't feel built to character-wise for a lot of the characters to me. And that might be me, too clouded by the books. Like he didn't think they earned the scene where Hopper the wolf died because we hadn't spent time building the relationship.
Hard
He didn't
disagree.
think. I mean, it did work for me, the scene. I will say that was one of my favorite scenes. He didn't think. He was disappointed that like the Horn of Valir. I mean, it was there, but we didn't spend any real time explaining what it did or like focusing on it. So when Matt blows it, we don't know what it's supposed to mean. I disagree with him there. I feel like he was very fixated on sort of making sure the thematics link up. But for me, it's like when I watch a scene, I feel it or I don't. And like
Yeah.
with the Matt scene, I mean, maybe because I'd read the book, so I know what the horn's supposed to do. You blow it, and heroes of the past come and they have little trails behind them and they fight for you. And it hit me emotionally because I felt
Yeah.
what like Matt was feeling solidarity. I agree that it's kind of insane that did they mention even once like what the horn does?
Yes.
I don't remember.
Very it's so this is there are a lot of like Easter egg details this season. I believe in a couple of early episodes, Rand overhears people talking about it in Kyrian. So there are like you can go back and see that they put Easter eggs in, but that's very different than like The Great Hunt, the book is all about them getting the Horn of Valir. So like Sanderson is right when he says like that's the MacGuffin of the book. They spend the entire book chasing the horn and then it gets blown at the end, and that's very different. He's right about that. But this is so here's my problem here, Dan. He's saying a lot of the problems with this episode are actually previous episodes. Stuff doesn't feel built to character-wise, but he didn't watch the previous episodes. So again, like I know, like whenever I say this, people come for me in the comments and are like, he read the scripts. And like, look, reading the scripts, I was hoping he would mention Barthanes because that is a huge part of like why they focused on Moiraine. They were building up the Barthanes Dark Friend reveal more. That in the books is like a throwaway reveal. You don't even really know Barthanes is related to Moiraine. He just like delivers a letter to Rand and is like, by the way, I'm a Dark Friend. And then he later shows up dead in his room. Like
they made it hit. You're right.
It's very forgettable. And without seeing things like that actor playing Barthanes as like the most likable person this season, like it's hard to really appreciate the way this stuff played out. So that's why this is what I mean about like almost it being like disrespectful or irresponsible to make sweeping generalities like that, because it's disregarding like what they did without actually having seen it. So that to me is just like, I don't really, he could have still commented on these things without saying things like that I don't think are, it's hard for him to really say with authority because he didn't see it. There's more stuff like that about the way the sausage is made in television, but we can get to that in a minute.
I see what you I see what you mean. That like again, like watching a show, at least for me, I think for most people, is emotional. It hits or it doesn't. And he read the script, so he knew like kind of the dramatic arithmetic of what was supposed to add up in the finale. But even if the equation didn't quite balance, when you see the actors on screen, it can still work. Like the map moment still worked for me, even though I didn't know what the Horn of Valir did. Even though, I mean, it didn't, the way that scene was blocked, it was like, oh, good, Matt can now fight these 20 random Shan-Shan guys, I guess. And that's what the heroes can do, even though it doesn't really matter if you think about it.
And I think
like,
those are all fair comments, like for sure.
But it doesn't matter if you're in it. If you're in it, I don't care. And he seemed to be kind of thinking with, like someone said, his writer brain. He couldn't turn off. I think it was Valerie, special friend of the pod. Although she also agrees about Hopper, not enough bonding. Lots of good comments here. Let's read some before moving on. Let's see. Randall says,
I want to talk about Hopper when we read Randall's. Okay. So let's get to that one.
Let's do it now. Randall says, I watched a ton of, although I think he's talking about the Horn. I watched a ton of non-reader reactions and no one really knew what it really was. They were all guessing and speculating, but all wrong, which the
Horn was an afterthought.
They could have made it a little more clear in the script.
Agreed.
Just like somebody mentioned it summons ghosts or something. Let's see.
So
What else
his
did Randall say? Randall says that didn't Hopper die in the first book not long after meeting Perrin and Egwene, which is true. We bonded with Hopper in the dreams. Bam.
Yeah, so let's talk about this because I think it's interesting hearing commentary from people like Brandon Sanderson and Daniel Green who really know the Wheel of Time very, very well.
Mhm.
Talking about like how we didn't pay off Hopper enough. Like Hopper dies almost before you really get to know him in the books. I looked back at this after watching the stream because I was like, I remember Hopper barely being in the book before he's killed. And like spoiler alert, Hopper casts a long shadow on the series. We do get to know him more after he dies. Um, so looking back, it's like they gave Hopper more specific focus in the television show than in the books because Perrin meets a
That's
bunch of
true.
wolves with Elias. And at that point, he's still not accepting that there's any wolf part of himself. So, like, he's talking to like
Oh,
3 different
I'm a man.
wolves. Like, he really only hangs out in person with Hopper like 2 or 3 times
Mhm.
before Hopper gets killed. So, like, it's his inciting incident. And here they made it like the culmination of his arc this season. Um,
I thought it
so
worked.
yeah, I totally agree with what Rant Moore just said. All the stream showed me is that even experts are prone to wild amounts of bias. Hopper is a perfect example of that because that is like when they say Hopper got, they earned the moment more in the books, like that is straight bias because most of Hopper's development happens after that. So it is showing no one's immune, maybe not even us.
Like a lot of the books are kind of things are developed almost retrospectively as he like
Yes.
figures out he wants them to be important and then builds them up like them thinking about it, which you can't really do in a TV show. I didn't have a problem with Popper personally. Yeah,
Yeah.
Sanderson was kind of was interested. I don't think preoccupied is too much to say. With I'm gonna go
No,
backwards, like with like
preoccupied is fair.
the the like the dramatic thematic arithmetic adding up, and when it
Yes.
didn't, he seemed to not really enjoy it. And I do think that's consistent with someone who's read the scripts but not watched the episodes. For
I
example, he would
agree.
say Nynaeve didn't do anything. Perrin has a shield. Rand didn't need to be there. This is the final scene at the tower where they fight Ishamael. Egwene just needed a sword to stab Ishamael.
Which is
I
so
don't want
wrong.
to downplay how good the stuff that's good in this episode was good, but it still bothers me that so many of the characters didn't have to be there, and so much of it doesn't seem to mean anything. And then later he said, kind of the same tack, like Egwene has the strongest arc, but Egwene does so much in this season, and nobody else really gets to do anything. Rand gets to stab Ishamael, but what does that mean? Like earlier, he wasn't even using the sword. What does a sword mean to him? Why doesn't he draw it to fight the Blade Master, but he draws to fight the Forsaken? Why? I mean, kind of good points. Some of them.
Kind of.
Again, there's like this difference between the intellectualizing of like we should have been told it means this, and then when it happens, we know what it means, versus when you watch it with the music and the drama and the acting, like you kind of get a meaning out of it, even if
Yeah.
it wasn't explicitly set up. I'm arguing against him more than I thought I would, honestly. I thought I'd be more on his side. With some of those moments, like I mostly like the tower scene. Again, it's emotional for me. Like he
Yeah.
had a problem with the scene where Egwene frees herself and kills Rena, her Suldam. And I didn't
Yeah.
really like that scene either. I was surprised how flat it landed for me, but not really for the reasons he was saying. I guess he didn't like the metaphysics of it, which okay, sure, like it doesn't go by the rules of their whatever magic system. And he's afraid that it kind of undermines the theme of you need to come together to fight evil. You can't do it alone. I guess I do agree with that. I think that would have been stronger if she had had some help and he would have had more to do. And I don't think it's weak to or like less empowering that you get some help from your friends in order to band together and fight against something. That all I know, but mostly I know that moment didn't land for me. That's what I mostly know.
Well,
But I'm more like feeling it than he is sort of thinking it through.
yeah. So what I'll say, I think this is again the I wish you'd watched, bro, because it is hard to comment on how things don't land. What does it mean when you haven't seen it? And so things like what does the sword mean? Like Rand didn't get the arc about the sword this season. That's going to be
Yeah.
next season. They've talked about this. he doesn't know they've talked about this because he's not paying attention. Um, so like with Egwene, I liked the Egwene Rhaena scene. I was torn on it because I think it represents something very different for Egwene. Because so in the books, Nynaeve and Elaine's plan to save Egwene works. They free her, they collar Rhaena, they leave her. Rhaena shows up like books and books later, and for a very brief period of time, she's killed off in a very unremarkable fashion. I can totally understand why the show would make the choice to close that circle here, by having Rhaena get killed, and why when they decided, so Rand fights Ishamael by himself in the books. And I'll be honest, Brandon Sanderson said that was a scene he'd been waiting 30 years to see. It's one of Robert Jordan's best scenes. Rand fights him in the clouds. I thought that was so stupid when I read that book the first time, because it comes out of nowhere. Because Ishamael's not involved with, well, it's cool, but like Ishamael's not involved at all with the Shan-Chan in the books. So it's kind of like this stuff is happening, and then Rand hits the final boss level, basically, and suddenly he's in the sky, and you don't know if it's a hallucination or not until after. It's very understandable why something like that wouldn't work. So once they decided to make his moment about everyone coming together behind him, which is the exact theme Sanderson is saying they didn't hit, they did it with Rand in this moment. For Egwene, then it becomes something different. Here's a person who was basically enslaved rising up against the person who enslaved her. I can definitely see how that would come off as a certain type of empowering, the way that they did it. I do agree that it kind of gives Nynaeve less to do, but to bring things back to Rand al Moore talking about the bias, it's also very funny to me because, again, Sanderson is like, why didn't Nynaeve just heal him? You have Nynaeve right there. She is supposed to be a good healer. That's her whole
she was
thing.
busy.
Well, she's got her block, and she uses her magic more in the books at this point. But someone found a quote from the books. I saw this on Twitter from a later book where Nynaeve is thinking back to Falme. And she's talking to Rand, and she's like, I remember you got your unhealing wound, the wound in his side. It's not going to heal well. And I remember that I couldn't help you because I couldn't channel because of my block. She explicitly states in the book she could not heal Rand in that moment. But here we have Brandon Sanderson being like, why wouldn't Nynaeve do it? So the bias, the long game bias of looking back at early books and thinking, why didn't these characters act like I know them from book 11, 12, 13 is very present, in my opinion.
Gotcha. I can hear all that. I mean, again, and I had issues with it, but it's not really his issues. And yeah, I thought I'd be more pro Brandon Sanderson in this podcast, but I'm finding that I do see him as a little, although he has the right. I think Julie said something that was pretty funny. Just where did the Night King get those chains back in the day?
Yeah,
I'm kidding.
That's exactly the sort of comments.
And I'm one always get upset over things that get cut. So I guess a writer has the right to get double upset. I do think he has the right to say everything he's saying. Obviously, he's literally the writer. He's earned the right. I was surprised. And now that I'm thinking through it in like vocalizing it, I guess it did seem a little, I don't know, what's the word? Myopic a tad. A little myopic. I agreed. Yeah. Like I would have, I love rewriting shows in my head. I know exactly how to make The Wheel of Time as good as it could be.
Of course.
But Prince Sanderson has different ideas. We all have different ideas, which is why not every show is perfect, because the ideas are only good until, I don't know, you put them through the crucible of production and voicing them and compromising and all that stuff. Until then, of course, they're perfect in your brain.
I think it's, ultimately he has the right to have the opinions he has about the show and the way that it's been done. I think the thing that surprised me the most, one, the way this was marketed was kind of folly, like we talked about, because I think it really set people's expectations up for it to be something very different than it actually was. So a lot of people, it was like getting a bucket of water dumped on your head a little bit for a lot of people watching this and being like, oh, it's just Brandon Sanderson picking this apart for an hour and a half. But I think the thing that surprised me is stuff like this last quote. So he said, I want to love it and I like it. I think people are going to enjoy watching this. I don't think they'll come back to it.
Oh,
Because what
that
brings
was
you
a
back?
money quote.
Yeah. So this is, to me, this is the sort of thing that I find really shocking, because to hear a producer say something like this about their show while it's on the air and they haven't even watched it, like, Dan, we report on TV shows all the time. I can't really think of many examples of someone doing something like that, where that's like so, like, almost like cruelly disrespectful to the team who worked on your own damn show, to say, I don't think people will rewatch the show when you haven't watched it once. Am I being oversensitive about that? Because it's stuff like that that surprised me more than his actual critiques.
That one was definitely the one that was the biggest whoa moment, because that's not just like, I think they should have done it this way. That's like, I don't think the show's going to succeed. Like, don't you produce the show? It's like,
Yeah.
it was wild. I don't want to call it wild. Well, maybe it's a tad disrespectful. It was interesting to hear. And by the way,
Yeah.
some folks agree with you. Dominic agrees too. I think Brandon Sanderson entitled his opinion, but even though I disagreed on quite a few of his points, I would have had a lot more respect for his opinion if he had watched the entire season. I think I am going to stick with my kind of theory about what was going on here, was that he read the scripts. He was coming at it from the dramatic arithmetic doesn't quite add up point of view.
Yeah.
But so much of what one gets out of a TV show or a movie is the emotional experience of watching it. And in that case, the arithmetic doesn't play as big a factor.
It's only one factor.
If the equation is
many.
still like wildly off balance, it still can be bothersome, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But you can make up for it in a lot of ways. I think the season did. I enjoyed watching the season. And maybe he was kind of speaking through that lens. And of course, he's very close to the material. He's closer than any of us certainly are.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that affects you too. But yeah, what a whoo! It was wild,
an
man.
exciting week.
We got to move on though, because we're talking a lot about this. Really fast. What are you watching, Daniel? If anything.
I mean, so I've been still watching The Wheel of Time. I've been doing a close watch of season 2 to pick out lots of little details for a secret thing. But aside from that, the main things I've been watching are Mike Flanagan this week. Binged all of the Fall of the House of Usher and Midnight Mass, because I loved Usher so much that my wife and I moved right on to Midnight Mass. And whoo, those are both so good. Starting House of Usher is like kind of incredible, the way he worked in different Poe short stories and poems into this thing. The actors, like, killing it. I think Usher is a really incredible show. Midnight Mass is insane. I loved it. Highly recommend if you need horror viewing for
nice.
October. How about you, Dan?
I'm watching Our Flag Means Death. That's pretty fun. It's nice. I'm getting psyched for Invincible season 2. I really like the first season. That's going out pretty quick. We'll be reviewing it on Winter is Coming. I'm keeping this moving because we talked a lot about time, as we should. Yes.
Yeah.
There is lots coming up though. Like it's not really abating. Loki's still on. The Percy Jackson show's coming up, so there'll be plenty to keep us talking.
Yeah.
But as we wind down this episode, why don't we engage in a round of our galaxy famous Wick News lightning round, where we go through a few stories that we didn't get to in the main body of the show and give our 20-second opinions. As usual, these are in no particular order, so we're just gonna start going and see what happens.
Let's do
here's
it.
a fun one, Daniel, for you. HOD Croatia, the Twitter account, X account, whatever you want to call it, shared this image that seems to be a deleted scene from the first season of House of the Dragon, where Rhaenys comforts her young daughter Rhaena after Rhaena has been rejected by the septuagenarian suitor King Viserys.
Yeah, so Rhaenys, I think this is Lena. House of the Dragon, making it easy on names. Dear God, Ryan Condal, HBO, release the deleted scenes, please.
Where are they?
give us the deluxe DVD with the deleted scenes. We will all buy it.
I'll buy it.
There are a lot of deleted scenes from House of the Dragon, and I want to see them.
It's crazy there are so many.
I can't believe that they haven't released them.
I would pay money. Okay.
Yes. So here's one for you, Dan. After their divorce, Sophie Turner and Joe Jonas have reached a co-parenting agreement.
Yes, they have. Oh, thank goodness. Sophie Turner, Joe Jonas, actress, singer, married, had 2 kids, divorced, celebrity drama, TMZ. I watched part of it unfold in an airport over the weekend. They reached a parenting agreement. Thank God. The famous family will kind of level out. Hopefully everything goes well. Best of luck. Divorce is hard. Family's hard. Rock on. By the way, Nicole is also watching The Fall of the House of Usher, and she liked Midnight Mass. So good taste on all of yours parts. All right, Daniel. Here's one that might be a little niche. Patrick Rothfuss, the author of the Kingkiller Chronicle series, very famous fantasy book series. He breaks silence. He was supposed to deliver a chapter of his new book, The Doors of Stone, for charity a while ago, but it hasn't happened. And now he kind of talked a bit about what's going on.
Yep. So Patrick Rothfuss, this was a whole almost like scandal where he did it for fundraising, saying he would release this chapter, and then he just didn't because he was trying to make it a bigger production than it needed to be and hire a bunch of voice actors and all this stuff, and he re-edited it. And that's kind of just what he does. So he said he feels really bad about it. And he kind of said, this is what I do. And I've had some personal stuff go down. So sure, I feel bad for him, but also only so bad because people paid a lot of money to charity, of all things. Okay, this is a lighter story. So Ian Cardone and Harry Belden are the new voices of Rick and Morty,
respectively. Yeah, Rick and Morty. I don't think it's a light story. This is a crazy story. This is Justin Roiland, the creator of Rick and Morty, voiced both Rick and Morty, was driven out of the show under allegations of assault, like physical battery and sexual assault, and they replaced him. They replaced the voices of Rick and Morty on a show called Rick and Morty. These two new guys apparently they did a good job. People seem to be liking it, so the show's going to continue. But it's strange what's happening with that series. Okay. Oh, here's one that you had an reaction to. Disney Plus is making a live action TV remake of the 90s kind of dark animated show Gargoyles. Will you watch?
I mean, I'll watch it because I was a kid and I liked Gargoyles, but this is one of those things where I'm just like, who in their right mind greenlit this? While you're canning stuff like Willow, you're not releasing Spiderwick Chronicles after it filmed. You're greenlighting a Gargoyles show. Like, who is this for? It's clearly for people our age because kids don't know who Gargoyles are. Yeah, baffling decisions over at Disney. Speaking of baffling decisions from streamers. Netflix is apparently opening brick and mortar locations in 2025.
That's kind of wild. So, like, to be clear, it's not like Blockbuster or whatever. I think it's more like Disney stores. You know, like where there's Disney stores, they're basically just glorified Funko Pop shops with like merch.
Yeah.
So I'm imagining like Stranger Things shirts and merch. And like a cafe where you can get, or like Squid Game masks, chess sets based on the Queen's Gambit. I don't know, stuff like that. It could be fun, I guess. Put one in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Daniel, The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon wrapped up its first season, and season 2 is on the way, and it's called The Book of Carol. It'll be all about the character of Carol.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited that they're doing season 2, that Carol's going to be in it. I have started Daryl Dixon, and I am enjoying it. I don't know what's up with these the Book of blah 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 titles. I bet there's not a damn book in this show, so it's unwieldy. It's an unwieldy title, but I'm excited about it nonetheless.
Love it.
Oh, all right, and we'll end with some Harry Potter news here. So Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, that is the stage play, eighth Harry Potter story. It's going on tour in North America for the very first time.
Yeah, I think that's cool. Harry Potter Cursed Child, very big Harry Potter play. It was a huge hit. It's played in like London, New York, these big cities. It'll go on tour across North America. So if you live, outside New York, you can't get to Broadway. If you want to see it, you can see it. I think it's neat. Good for it. As far as I can tell, it'll only be one play because it used to be like two plays. Which is insane to me. So one play, probably the best way to go with that.
Yeah.
Cursed Child. Okay, that was a good one. I enjoyed talking with you, Daniel. I enjoyed talking with everybody out there. Thanks for tuning in. And if you want to hear more from, as Andrew, great comment, the Book of Daniel Roman coming to Netflix 2025.
Why are you wishing this on me, Andrew?
If you want to hear more of us, we're available in podcast form wherever podcasts are available, be it Google Play, iTunes, or elsewhere. And we stream live every single Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. 3 p.m. East Coast, 1 p.m. Mountain, noon on the West Coast, and pretty early in Australia, but I don't think early enough that it won't be too much of a problem for you, Julie. Sorry about that. This was fun. Thanks, guys, for commenting. Hope to see you back next week. And Brandon Sanderson, if you have a problem with anything we said, I guess you'll just have to come on the show and we can interview and talk about it. We'll be in touch. Good night, good luck, and adios. Bye.
Take care, y'all.